What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Episode 30. How did we get to 30 episodes so quickly? And I say we, I mean me, myself, and I. Although, watch this space as I am in the process of arranging some guest episodes for a second season. So I'm going to bring in some other experts who work with leaders and get them to share their 3 light bulbs. So very excited about that. I've had some conversations with people that I have met over the years who I know will have lots to share that will be of value to you. So watch this space. That will come in the summer. I'm currently in the process of collating some guests and arranging the recording. So for now, it's still me talking through my light bulbs from my week's work with clients. So what have I been up to this week? It's been a 4-day week because I've had that bank holiday. I've also had the heat wave, which has made things a little bit interesting. And actually it's been interesting how much that has come up in client conversations. It's bringing some different challenges for leaders this week. And it's been interesting to hear how people have been tackling that. I've been busy with client work this week, compressed it all into a couple of days, but spent the day at Western College. Interesting. Driving to Weston-super-Mare on the week of a heat wave. Everybody else was heading to the beach. We were heading to Western College to spend the day with some leaders from Muller, as in the yogurt company. They are on a leadership and management apprenticeship, and we came in to deliver a workshop very similar to what we delivered to the fire service last week to help their leaders with mental health, resilience, confidence as they continue on their journey. They were all currently in leadership roles and looking to continue to progress within the organization. So we came in to support them with that. So that was a great day, really good. Meet another cohort from Muller on their program. And on Thursday, had a couple of one-to-one sessions, had a consultation call with a potential new client, and also had the BKR monthly meetup. Now, this is our last online session before we meet up in person in Morocco in a couple of weeks' time, coming to the end of their 2-year leadership development program with me. And we had 2 partners from BKR come in to answer some questions. It's always very, very interesting to see what questions those who are aspiring partners have to ask existing partners and to hear the answers as well. I'm very grateful for those partners that came in and for their openness in their answers, because it was interesting to hear how they've shaped their leadership journey, things that they've done, lessons that they've learned along the way, and also their level of honesty about being authentic, staying aligned with your values, trusting your decision making, but also being okay with saying, I don't know, there's other people who know more, and holding your hands up when things don't quite go to plan. So it was a good reminder for everybody in the room, and it was great to hear them talk that through. So that's been the majority of the client work this week. So here are my light bulbs that have come out of that work. Okay, first one. What would a director do? And it's come up in a couple of ways, actually, really supporting clients to put themselves in that future position. And I'm working with a couple of people right now who are either newly promoted into a more senior position, or they are aspiring to be in a more senior position within the next 12, 18 months. And the future version of you as a leader, getting really clear on what you want that to look like. It's an exercise I have done in group workshops. It's an exercise that I often give to the clients that I work with. And it has some guided questions around what they want that future version of them being a leader at that more senior level, what do they want that to look like? And so when this comes up in client sessions, when people are wanting to be more visible, but also wanting people to see them as being able to work at that more senior level, that more strategic level, we have to really think about how we want to show up that will allow people to be able to see what it is that we want them to see. This came up in conversations this week where we were talking about meetings, both one-to-one and also department meetings, and where there would be an opportunity to demonstrate that you are able to think at that more strategic level, to demonstrate that you are able to think and plan and make those decisions, thinking about that bigger picture, thinking about what's involved, rather than the more tactical ways of thinking and ways of working. And we were talking through a scenario that was going on for this individual. And I asked the question, what would a director do? If you were in that more senior position, what would you do? Thinking of that future version of you, acting as if you are already there. Thinking of other people who you have worked with, who are in that more senior position, who you really admire, who you very much respect, and who you aspire to be like. What would they do? And the minute I asked the question, it was very clear that they shifted into a different way of thinking and moved from, okay, I think we need to do it like this, to, okay, what do I need to consider? What else do I need to consider as my options? How do I need to think about this at this level? And what consequences do I need to consider? Not just the first consequence, not just the second consequence, but the second and third order consequences, not just what happens next, but what happens 6 months down the line. It's one of the things we look at on the Elevate Your Efficiency program, different decision-making models that widen that consideration, that look at second and third order consequences, that allow you as a leader to think more strategically rather than more tactically. And actually the client said, if we hadn't have talked it through, if I had not have asked that question, they would have planned things in a very different way. And the challenge now for them is not to just think about this in this scenario, but to really look for the opportunities where there are other options to think like this and demonstrate the thinking like this. At that tactical level, the language you would expect from leaders is, I think, I feel, this is what I do. And that's because you're close to the ground. You're very used to knowing the detail. You're very used to knowing or being that subject matter expert. You're very close to the people who are in the detail. So you have the detail. At a more strategic level, the language is more likely to be, the data says, these are the options. This is what we need to consider. These are the risks. These are the benefits. This is what I've considered. This is what I've explored. This is the data that's available. This is the data that's missing. Neither of them are wrong. They just belong at different levels. And in different environments, you would expect the tactical input and the strategic input. And the tactical input may well influence the strategic input, or will be part of the data that the strategic input covers. You can't think like a director or a CEO or a partner while you're leading like that team leader, like that manager. And that's not down to capability. It really is down to how you see yourself, the habits and behaviors that you are adopting, and how you are consciously thinking about how you approach things. So there may be an opportunity here for you too, depending on what level you are at now. Now, this could be that you are not yet promoted and you are considering how you want to show up in that first leadership role. How do you need to think? How do you need to behave? And where are your opportunities for people to see that from you? In the same way, if you're already in that team leader role, where are your opportunities to demonstrate being able to think at that more strategic level? And if you are already in a more senior position and have aspirations for partner, director, CEO, COO, What does that need to look like? And where are your opportunities for you to demonstrate the habits, the behaviors, the ways of thinking, the ways of approaching things that people need to see to demonstrate that you are ready for that level? Where are your opportunities? Before your next meeting, what's the next level version of you bringing to that conversation? Take data, not just your feelings, not just your experience. Take the data, take options, and not just perspectives or opinions or points of view. Take the data, take the information, take considerations, take consequences, benefits, risks, and what have you considered? And let me know. This will be part of the workshop for June. So if you are interested in finding more out about that, then let me know, or head to the website under the community section. The details and the event details are all listed there. You'll be very welcome to join us. Okay. Second light bulb from this week, also something that came up in a one-to-one session. And that's that nobody tells you that it's okay for your team to get things wrong and potentially fail, depending on how you see failure. Now, the conversation came up, as I said, with a client. They'd come into the session and we were reflecting on what we had discussed the previous session. And they shared that actually between those calls, they had let some things go. They had questioned and been more conscious about when they were stepping in, when they were fixing and making a real effort not to rescue. And they said, by their own admission, it would be things that they would have stepped in and jumped in on before. And interestingly, they said that something had shifted off the back of that last session. They were recognizing when it was helpful and when it wasn't. And I've talked about this in episode 29. So if you haven't heard that, flip back to that episode where I'll talk through it in more detail. Making that shift over how we choose to show up as a leader means that sometimes we have to let go of beliefs or ways of thinking that aren't helping. And it's that difference between that tactical leader that is very much used to rolling up sleeves and helping the team, to the more strategic leader that takes a step back, is very clear on expectations, very clear on what is needed, but gives people that space to work it out for themselves. They're still there if that person needs to be supported, but they're not jumping in, fixing and rescuing, and being okay that it is okay for people to make mistakes because that's where they learn. Knowing which mistakes to step back and allow to happen is a different challenge. But actually, most of us know which are the riskier ones and which ones can we afford to let go of. In your role as a leader, you are juggling a lot of balls, spinning a lot of plates. And often we feel that we are responsible for catching everything, fixing everything, keeping everything moving. And how often do we hear or do we get that reassurance that actually it's okay if some of those plates fall? It's okay if some of those balls get dropped. We just need to be very clear for ourselves, which are most important to us, which are the glass ones, which are the ceramic ones, but also make sure that our teams also know which are the glass ones, which are the ceramic ones, which ones most definitely cannot be dropped. But we can't keep everybody else's plates spinning as well as our own. We can't juggle everybody else's balls as well as our own. We might be accountable. We might need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure they have the environment and the situation to keep everything up in the air. But we're not responsible for the actual juggling and the spinning. That's the difference between intentional leadership that looks at the bigger picture, make sure that everything is in place to allow their teams, allow their people to work in the best possible way, versus the reactive leadership where you're trying to keep everything going, trying to be the one that holds it all together. They're not our plates to spin. They're not our balls to juggle. That's why we bring in a team. So we need to make sure that we recognize everybody has a role to play. Everybody has a part to play and everybody has their responsibilities. And actually, sometimes failing, sometimes dropping things is part of the learning process. And that's how they learn to keep their plates spinning, to keep their balls in the air. If we keep jumping in and taking it off them, they are never going to learn. So recognizing where that line is. We can talk about spinning plates. We can talk about bouncy balls. It's the same analogy. Recognize which ones are yours. Recognize who's spinning what, who's juggling what, and recognize you are not always going to be there to catch it. Sometimes it's got to fall. Sometimes it will break with very little consequences at all. And that's okay. And that's okay for you as a leader to take a step back and give yourself permission to let them fail without blame, without shame, without consequence. Recognize which are the ones that you need to make sure you are giving them the support, the guidance, and that they have ownership for what needs to stay up in the air, and that they are finding their best way forward to be able to enable them to do that, because it ain't yours. Okay. My third and final light bulb for this episode, and this also comes up with visibility. And if you're not talking about what you're doing, are people going to assume that you're not doing it? It's come up again. I love how sometimes these similar topics come up with different leaders in different industries. And again, this is another leader who wants to be visible. They want to make sure that in different meetings, their work, their contribution, their significance is seen and heard. And when we're in meetings, and I've talked about this before, we see this a lot with the support functions, incredibly important functions, but with the support functions, whether it's IT, HR, recruitment, it doesn't have the visible, tangible results that other departments have. It doesn't have the data that people can talk about in meetings in the same way. And when you are quietly delivering strong results with your team, and those results are contributing to key and significant successes within the business, how do you make sure that that is recognized? Because other departments who are able to deliver based on what you are achieving will highlight their deliverables. They will highlight their results because it's easier for them to be able to do that. So if you don't have those tangible results, how do you make sure that it's visible? We've all been in the room when we have seen people who are very comfortable with naming their involvement, sharing their wins, telling people what they've contributed to. And if we are not in those kind of roles, it's very difficult for us to do that. And if it's difficult for us to do that, we can sometimes feel that it's uncomfortable trying to do that. Again, this is something I'm going to pick up in the workshop in June, because it's come up too many times with individual clients now that it has to be covered in a workshop to help you all out. And I know that for a lot of you listening, this will resonate with you. People are telling me, I don't feel the need to bring it up. But the perception is, if I'm not talking about it, then it's not happening. There is an assumption that this work is not going on because people are blind to the amount of work that is going on because they're not seeing it. I'm not talking about it. And then somebody else said, I'm good at what I do, very good at making things happen, just not good at getting it into the room. And so often we have this historical belief that we let good work speak for itself, that the work that we have done has always spoken for itself. And for a lot of us, that is the case. The challenge is when we go into a department where allowing the work to speak for itself means that people might not know how much work is going into it. Visibility isn't ego. And it isn't self-promotion in the way that makes people feel uncomfortable. What we want to do is to make sure that the contribution that you and your team are making is connected to the outcomes that people are already celebrating. So when somebody in another department shares a win, you can talk about how you contributed to that, either through recruitment or through supporting somebody returning to work or reducing absenteeism, presenteeism, or staff engagement, or how you recruited that person in the first place, how you might have prevented a crisis, or how you've created the technology that meant that they were able to do that. That success is often like the first domino. And if you are that first domino, or you are a domino in that line, then say so. We cannot afford to wait for people to notice if we want to be visible, if we want those opportunities. So we have to ask ourselves, what do I need to do to shine a light on the things that people are not seeing? Firstly, what do I want people to see? What do I want people to know that they are not yet seeing? And how do I shine a light on that so that it becomes more visible? And the second part of that, what are you celebrating in private that deserves to be said out loud? What are you recognizing with your team? What are you calling out with your team that deserves to be recognized and seen in that wider scenario? That recognition is important, not just for you and your future opportunities, future career progression. It's also important for your staff, for your teams, for them to recognize, and talked about this in the feedback workshop, am I valued? Is my work valued? And what is my pathway with where I am now and where I'm going? It will be the same for you too. So we need to make sure that it's not just that recognition of contribution for ourselves, but the recognition and contribution for our teams too. That's going to help engagement. That's going to help them to show up. And that is going to help you to have a high-performing team. It's not just about you. It's about your team too. So those are my 3 light bulbs from this week. Again, they are all about shifting from being reactive to being intentional. So much of it requires you to see yourself differently first. Thinking from that next level before you've been given permission to be there. Before you're in a role that says you're there, before you get paid to be in that position to be there. It's letting go of the old ways of working that aren't working for us in the role that we're in now. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And I'll talk about this more next week. We're coming to the end of the Elevate Your Efficiency program. And so much of the changes and the shifts that people have been making have been down to how they see themselves leading, how they've led before, how they want to lead. And that shift from all of the old ways of working that have resulted them being in overwhelmed, firefighting all day, working long hours, not getting things done, to being intentional leaders that are setting time aside to work on strategic work, going home on time. And one of them's just gone into a full week off. They've briefed their team, confidently handed everything over and said in the call this week, they've got it. They know what they're doing. They know what needs to be done. And if not, I'll pick it up when I come back. Such a big shift. So I'll share more on that next week because we do still have the final module to work through with them. So I will share more about it. There is a waiting list ready for the next cohort in September. So if you want to find out more, then pop me a message and let me know. Or again, head to the website, look at the program, and the link to join the waiting list is there. It's always a small program. Places will be limited. But if you're interested, get yourself on the waiting list and you will be first to know when the doors open in July. That's all from me for this week. Have a great week ahead. If you've got any questions, you know where I am, and I will speak to you all very soon. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.